What would you do if your daughter called you in tears, saying the HOA president's son had tied her to a tree and humiliated her on a university campus? Most parents would rush over immediately. But what the HOA president Karen didn't know was that when my daughter Jeny called for help at Clearwater University in Oak Ridge, she wasn't just calling any concerned father. She was calling someone whose real identity would shock everyone in that principal's office. This is the story of how one mother's entitled behavior and her son's racist harassment collided with consequences they never saw coming. Homeowners associations wield significant power in American communities, governing everything from lawn maintenance to parking rules. But what happens when that power extends beyond property lines and into personal vendettas? In Tennessee, HOA disputes have become increasingly common, with over 31,000 incidents reported across communities nationwide in recent years. The state's HOA laws provide some protections for homeowners, but enforcement can be inconsistent, especially when board members abuse their authority. Karen, the HOA president in our Oak Ridge community, had been flexing her power for months. Her son James had grown up watching his mother intimidate neighbors with violation notices and fines, learning that being connected to the HOA meant you could get away with almost anything. The toxic combination of entitled parenting and unchecked community authority was about to create a perfect storm. The incident began at Clearwater University campus, where my daughter Jeny was spending time with friends. As a young black woman, she had already faced subtle discrimination in our predominantly white neighborhood, but nothing had prepared her for what James would do that day. According to research on campus harassment, incidents targeting students based on race have surged by over 24% in recent years, with intimidation being the most common form. When Jeny's friend called me, her voice was frantic and filled with anger. She described how James had approached my daughter with a group of friends, making cruel jokes about her appearance before escalating to physical harassment. The image of my daughter tied to a tree while eggs were thrown at her filled me with a rage I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just bullying, this was a hate crime happening in broad daylight. The drive to campus felt endless, but my military training kicked in. Years of serving in specialized operations had taught me to channel fury into focused action. When I arrived, the scene was exactly as described. My daughter was tied to a tree near the student center, her clothes stained with egg residue, tears streaming down her face. James and his friends stood nearby, laughing and recording the incident on their phones like it was entertainment. The moment I stepped out of my vehicle, the atmosphere changed completely. My muscular frame and commanding presence immediately caught their attention. James's mouth fell open, his eyes widening as he took in my size and the unmistakable confidence that comes from years of military service. The laughter died instantly. His friends scattered like leaves in a storm, suddenly finding urgent reasons to be elsewhere. I walked calmly to my daughter, my voice steady despite the fire burning inside. "Are you hurt, Jeny?" She shook her head, relief flooding her face as I untied the ropes. The crowd that had gathered to watch the entertainment now stood in stunned silence, many pulling out their phones to record what they sensed would be a very different kind of show. James tried to back away, but I wasn't finished. In one fluid motion, I grabbed him by the ankle and hoisted him up to the same tree branch where my daughter had been tied. As he dangled upside down, his face turning red, I spoke in the calm, measured tone that had once commanded respect from soldiers under my command. "You're going to apologize to my daughter. And you're going to mean it." The apology came quickly, stammered between gasps as blood rushed to his head. But I knew this wouldn't end here. Karen would never let her precious son face consequences without a fight. Sure enough, the next morning brought an angry phone call from the principal's office. Karen had arrived with James, demanding justice for what she called an assault on her child. The principal, Dr. Martinez, seemed nervous as we sat in his office. Karen had clearly been working her HOA president magic, making threats about the university's reputation and her community connections. She sat with her arms crossed, James beside her with a bruised ego and a newfound understanding of consequences. Karen's eyes blazed with indignation as she launched into her prepared speech about my violent overreaction, and demanded I be arrested. "Your daughter was probably asking for it anyway," she sneered, revealing the racist attitudes that had clearly shaped her son's behavior. "James was just having fun with his friends. Boys will be boys." The principal looked uncomfortable but seemed ready to side with the influential HOA president rather than rock the boat. That's when I reached into my wallet and placed my identification on the desk. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Dr. Martinez's face went pale as he read the credentials. Karen's angry expression melted into confusion, then shock, then something approaching terror. "Ma'am," I said quietly, looking directly at Karen. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Martin Fletcher, United States Army Special Operations Command." The silence in that room was deafening. "And what your son did to my daughter wasn't boys being boys. It was a racially motivated assault captured on multiple cell phone videos by witnesses." Karen's hands began to tremble as the full implications hit her. This wasn't just any angry parent she could intimidate with her HOA connections. This was a decorated military officer who had spent decades in special operations, someone with direct access to federal authorities and a network of contacts that extended far beyond her small community power base. The principal immediately shifted gears, his tone becoming apologetic and professional. "Colonel Fletcher, we take these incidents extremely seriously. We'll be conducting a full investigation and implementing appropriate disciplinary measures." Karen tried to object, but her voice had lost all its earlier confidence. James received more than just a final warning. The university launched a formal investigation into the hate crime, involving campus police and potentially federal authorities given the racially motivated nature of the assault. Video evidence from multiple witnesses made denial impossible. The incident became a teaching moment about the serious legal and academic consequences of harassment and discrimination. But the real revelation came when I explained to Karen exactly how her son's actions violated not just university policies, but federal hate crime statutes. Her face grew paler as I detailed the potential criminal charges, civil liability, and the fact that hate crimes are prosecuted with the full weight of federal law enforcement. The HOA president, who had spent years intimidating neighbors, suddenly found herself facing consequences that her community connections couldn't influence. Karen's attempts to minimize the incident or blame my daughter fell apart completely when confronted with military precision and federal authority. The woman who had built her identity around wielding power over others discovered what real authority looked like when it was used to protect rather than oppress. The aftermath was swift and decisive. James faced immediate suspension from the university pending a full disciplinary hearing. The hate crime investigation proceeded through proper channels, with federal authorities reviewing the case for potential prosecution. Karen's reputation in the community began to crumble as word spread about her son's actions and her attempts to cover them up. More importantly, this incident became a catalyst for broader changes. The university implemented stricter policies on harassment and hate crimes, with mandatory training for all students on the legal and academic consequences of discriminatory behavior. The Oak Ridge community began questioning Karen's leadership, with several neighbors filing complaints about her pattern of discriminatory enforcement and abuse of HOA authority. For homeowners dealing with HOA abuse, this story illustrates several crucial points. First, document everything. The video evidence in this case was crucial for establishing the facts. Second, know your rights under both state and federal law, particularly regarding discrimination and harassment. Third, don't be intimidated by titles or community connections when someone violates your basic rights or threatens your family's safety. Karen learned that real authority comes with real responsibility, something she had forgotten during her reign as HOA president. James learned that actions have consequences, regardless of his mother's community connections. And my daughter Jeny learned that she has a father who will always stand up for her, no matter who tries to intimidate or harm her. The university's handling of the situation improved dramatically once they understood they were dealing with federal authorities rather than just another parent complaint. This demonstrates the importance of proper channels and legitimate authority when confronting institutional failures or discriminatory behavior. If you found this story helpful in understanding how to confront HOA abuse and stand up for your family's rights, hit that like button if you believe communities deserve transparent leadership and protection from discrimination. Subscribe to HOA Files for more stories where regular folks use smart tactics and legitimate authority to reclaim their power from those who abuse their positions. Remember, knowledge of your rights and proper documentation can level any playing field, no matter how powerful your opponents think they are.